direct conversation, some deep reactions, please. All this comics narration ain't late me. A little more talk, a lot less read. A little fight, baby, is what I need. Close the trade, open up your brains. Explain it to me. Explain it to me, baby. Explain it to me.
Thank you, Vandello, and welcome to Red Conversations. My name is Josh Wasta, a.k.a. Fallout Fieri. And with me, strumming my pain with her fingers, singing my life with her words, killing me softly with her song, it's Miss Leia Cameron.
Hello, everybody. I understand why we could not use the song I just shared with you recently as an intro, but
well, if you had let me know ahead of time, I absolutely would have. In fact, I would have put it. I may still put it at the end of this episode.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and hope that the fabulous Rachel Bloom does not give me a cease and desist.
Right.
And with us for the first time, Mr. Joshua Lawrence. Josh, good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Wow.
We do like the long-time listeners. And you've known Leia for quite some time.
I've known Josh since he was 5.
I was thinking of this the other day. Was it going on like 30, 35 years you've known me?
Most of your life, yes.
Yeah.
That is true. That is very true. He was my sister's first boyfriend in kindergarten.
I was a player.
Which is weird that you've known him for like 35 years since you're only 23, Leia. That's
yes. It is crazy.
That is a mathematical impossibility.
I smell multiverse going on here. But...
That's right. As long as there's no clones and no moon.
Josh and I have known each other for a very, very long time. His late sister, Becky, was one of my very best friends in the world. And Josh occupies a special position in my life and in my heart because he is basically my adopted Jewish brother. I have celebrated Jewish holidays with him and his family for ever and ever and ever and always. And so we are very close in that regard. It's been a long journey, but I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Like I said, I've actually been listening to Red Conversations for quite a while. I think, Leia, you told me when you started doing it is when I subscribed and started listening. And I just love hearing your guys' voices. I love your in-depth analysis of all things geek and nerd.
Oh,
well, thank you. And if you've listened to any graphically novel, that is about to start back up as well. Bear, Jen, and I just had the conversation to go through our favorites. So keep an eye out for our episodes on, what do we decide on? The Hulk, Superman, Sandman, and Spider-Man. And It may be multi-episode. The Sandman one will probably throw in Dead Boy Detectives because that just dropped on Netflix. And
I haven't seen it yet, but intend to. Yeah, I've heard good.
Have not. We're finishing Yellow Jackets first because we suffer. I mean, it's a brilliant show, but it's very heavy. Not Jessica Jones levels of heavy, but just very heavy. But Josh, since you've never been on a graphically novel production, please give us your history with comic books. I can see your video where you have wonderful bookshelves behind you filled to the brim with graphic novels. So
my story starts way back in 1991 when I was a wee little lad, and I went to my first comic book store, and I picked up X-Men #1, Jim Lee and Chris Claremont. I picked up the wraparound cover at the time, opened it up, read that, went, oh, this is awesome. And I was a wee little lad. And then, I picked up some other, like Robin. I remember picking up issue 1 of Robin in the 90s. And then, like most teenagers or most kids turn to other things when they get a little older. So I kind of got away from comic books in my teens, got into music. And it wasn't until maybe my early 20s that I got back into comic books when I picked up a Wizard World magazine and saw they're doing a Spider-Man movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was reading through the magazine and I went, what are the Young Avengers and why are they important?
Yeah, that's when I Kool-Aid manned through the wall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But this was the original Young Avengers with Jim Chung as the artist. So, and that got me right back into comic books. I have about 9 long boxes in my closet from Marvel, DC, from early to mid 2000 to 2012. So we're talking House of M. If we're putting it in Marvel timeline turns, House of M to Avengers versus X-Men.
Nice. Very nice.
So I have a bunch of Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, comic books, DC. We can go from, let's say, timeline-wise, Blackest Night to right before New 52. So we're talking Flashpoint.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Leia's favorite exercise manual.
Fuck the cosmic trick.
I can add that to Clones in the Moon treadmills.
Yes.
It's just the cosmic treadmill. Regular treadmill's totally fine. The cosmic treadmill, shut the fuck. What a stupid idea.
So yeah, my comic book knowledge is very vast. So when you guys posted on Facebook, what do you guys want to talk? Like, here are the storylines we're going to go over, and I'm sitting there going like, Reddit. Oh, I didn't read this one, and I immediately texted Leia, like, "Hey, get me on your show." She never responded, by the way, because I know how awesome Leia is with text.
Oh yeah, I'm notoriously that's nobody's fault but my own. I am widely and well known for seeing a text, thinking, yes, I'll respond to that later. 17 days later, I'm like, oh no, that text message.
And then I emailed, and here I am.
Yes, and we're so happy to have you. So, hit me with your give me the last 5 years. What's probably one of your favorite stories the last 5 years?
Marvel, DC, or Independent?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Just go with yes.
Because currently I'm leaning more towards the independent side of comics because Marvel and DC say, hey, let's reboot the universe. And I go, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you just did that 2 years ago. Currently, I will say Skybound, Energon universe, killing it. Daniel Warren Johnson, amazing. So if we're going that route, last 5 years, I would say Murder Falcon, do a Powerbomb. If you're a wrestling fan,
good things. Do a Powerbomb. Yeah.
Do a Powerbomb's on my list. Yeah.
Oh, if you are a wrestling fan and a manga anime fan, just go read it.
Yeah. Okay. A friend of the podcast, Adam Witt, actually just recently read that one and said that he was prepared to hate it and then ended up really liking it. So, and he's a big wrestling fan as well. So endorsed by the podcast, Adam Witt.
Let's see, what else have I been reading past 5 years? Oh, gee, there's just so much. Oh, yeah. Currently there's a fantasy comic book called Barbaric, who I don't know if you guys are familiar with. The writer is Michael Marecki. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. It is literally, so the premise is there's this barbarian who is cursed with this axe that can talk to him, and so every time the barbarian and the axe go killing people, the axe drinks the blood of the enemies and gets drunk.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, if you're familiar with like Hellboy, like they do like 3 issues and that's the end of a story arc.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how Barbaric is. It's 3-4 issues, end of a story arc, on to the next one. So they're like 3 volumes in right now, and they're starting their 4th one next week.
Nice.
Which would be April 30th, I believe. I don't know. So I'm loving that.
Right.
See, I also recently read Dick Tracy, the new Dick Tracy. That's gonna be.
I didn't know there was a new Dick Tracy. That's pretty awesome.
Same thing. Like, wow. Okay.
The same guy that wrote Barbaric is co-writing Dick Tracy.
Huh.
So it's that very noir-ish, 1920s, 1930s.
Oh, and that's right up my alley. I unabashedly love the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy movie.
That was like a huge deal when I was a kid.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Like my friend, my co-host for Graphically Novel Bear, we have this ongoing joke that anytime we see a walnut, we'll be like, walnuts is good for the liver.
I'm trying to think of what else, like the past 5 years, but like I have a giant amount of bookshelves filled with comic books. I'm trying to sit there and pick and choose.
No, I get that. Like whenever somebody asks me like what my favorite song by my favorite band is, and suddenly I'm like, I've never listened to music in my life. I have no idea.
Ever. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you some of my favorite comic books I've ever read. Like
Sure.
Old Walking Dead.
Yes.
Old Man Logan is probably one of my favorite Wolverine stories ever.
Yeah, it was good.
We did do that one.
We did.
Oh, believe me, I listened to that. And I went, aw.
Something recently that I read, and I don't think it's in the last 5 years, but I'm going to put it on the list, is Something is Killing the Children.
Oh, you're a huge horror fan.
If you're a horror fan, so
sure
good.
Am. I sure am, but I've never heard of that before. So now you have my attention.
So good.
If you loving Something Killing the Children, then you have to pick up House of Slaughter.
That is on a list.
Yeah. Same universe.
Read more horror comics, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
If you're a huge like slasher, like Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th Halloween fan.
I'm not, but
there's a one called Nailbiter.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Nailbiter, but it's about a serial killer who literally bites the nails off his victims.
Oh, terrible.
And the story is about the town he grew up in, where everybody in that town is a serial killer.
Sounds like it would be like really difficult to keep a stable population.
It is.
Okay.
It is. It's a very small town.
Okay. I definitely hope that's addressed. If you're Captain Buzzkill over here, like, well, actually, yeah.
Leia, the population of Gimli, Canada is actually 500 million people. Sorry, that's an inside LARP joke from forever ago.
Say, just edit that one right out.
I could go on and on about comic books because I work part-time at a comic book store. So
I find it incredible that you do work part-time at a comic book store and you've not read this work that we're going to be discussing today, but I can kind of understand why you haven't. So we'll get into that.
Well, there's a funny story about this because my late sister actually gave it to me to read, and I never read it. I literally have it right here.
I genuinely think it's because this heartens me and saddens me, but in a happy way, because I'm 99.9% sure I'm the one who gave that to her. So that actually makes me like really overclumped.
Oi, Leia.
Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. A chickpea is neither a chick nor a pea. Discuss.
Leia, you sit down. You look a little tired, sweet.
How's your mother? How's your mother? Doing okay?
My mother's great. You know, she's singing in the choir.
I'm gonna sit over here. I'm gonna sit over here in the goy chair.
No.
So, we have not said it, but we are going to be doing MAUS today, which we will be taking a kind of a much more serious note than this show generally does. Before I turn it over to Leia, I kind of want to say a couple of housekeeping things specifically about this book. The first one is, this is an important book to both Leia and myself. Leia works in the Jewish community in Chicago, and I actually went to college to be an English teacher. So for separate reasons, like I said, very personal to the both of us. For me, it's because this is one of the most banned books in the United States. One of the most challenged books in the United States. For the crime of talking about the Holocaust, which to me is completely and utterly unacceptable. There will be a version of this episode. I won't say, obviously for reasons of censorship, I won't say it will be extra edited. It will be extra polished. It will be cleaned. Some areas will be left out. And the idea of that is we will be putting it out as a classroom edition so that teachers can assign it to their students and hopefully not get shit canned for it. MAUS goes on a list with some fantastic other banned books. If there is anyone that's interested in reading it all and you ever see that a book is banned, read it. Because they're almost never banned for a legitimate reason. The most banned book in history has been 1984, which if anybody has ever read 1984, it's all about how the government is basically brainwashing you. The fact that it is the most banned book says everything you need to know about the entire process of banning books. But some of the other banned books that personally I'm just going to recommend, and then I'll turn it over to Leia, is 1984, obviously. Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, The Bluest Eye, Beyond Magenta, Transgender Teens Speak Out, and Huckleberry Finn. If you want to stay in the comic book sphere, there has been a comic book the last 15 years that has hit the most banned book list, and that is Saga, which is a fantastic comic. It is a space opera, but it has been labeled as anti-family. Yeah. Again, books are never banned for legitimate reasons. They are banning them so that you cannot become an intelligent, free-thinking citizen. The people that want to keep books from you do not have your best interest in mind. And with that, I will turn it over. Normally, I would be going through our spiel on how we normally do this, but this is going to be more of a conversation, which Leia will get into. So take it away, Professor Al.
Yeah. So I'm doing something a little bit different for this one. I thought long and hard about even doing MAUS on this podcast at all, because it is a bit of a departure from what we normally do, in as much what we do for the majority of this podcast is fiction. We do superhero stories. We do, even all kinds of different types of stories, but we don't really ever get into memoirs or biographies or autobiographies. And this is kind of a combination of all those things. And as such, there's no plot. This is somebody's lived experience. So I'm not going to go through plot points or describe scenes to you. If you want to see visuals, the internet is at your fingertips. You can also watch Schindler's List, and you can read this book. And that's the other thing that I also want to really stress here is I want people to read this with their own eyes. I don't think any podcast we can do about it will fully do it justice or give it the nuance that it needs, because there's all kinds of things just in the artwork itself that are important to see, important to look at, and then of course the story that's being told. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to read through bits and pieces of the Wikipedia summary, and then Josh Lawrence, feel free to stop me at any point during this if you have questions, want a clarification. So very similar to how we normally do our stuff, except there's a lot more nuance behind it, and obviously I won't have all the answers. We're not going to raise our hands and yell comic books. We don't know the answer. This is not this is not a comic book. It is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
I have also been reading, have not completed, but have been reading MAUS, which is a it's also by Art Spiegelman, and basically it's like a novelization of the deeper conversations. It's an interview format, and it's a little bit more about how his process was with writing this book, and why he wrote this book, and what it was like, the impact on his family, the impact on his community, the impact globally, et cetera, and so forth. It's really fascinating, and I also encourage you to read it. If you're into that, there's snippets and bits and pieces of Art Spiegelman's artwork in it, but by and large, it's basically a back and forth, very, very long interview about, with a million questions about all kinds of things. So I may not have all the answers, but that book might have them. So I'm using it as kind of a companion piece here. And that being said, I'm going to start off with actually something I found just this morning while looking at it. And I'm going to directly quote this from the interview. There's a page in a 1985 notebook of of yours, and this is the interviewer speaking to Art Spiegelman, in which you're speculating explicitly on what you would say if someone asked you about the premise of MAUS. You write, there's more to survival than bringing the body through its ordeal unscathed. There's the building of a personality with depth and understanding, something difficult enough to achieve even without passing through the center of history's hell. Survival is having children even if they hate you. Vladek believes that Kaddish is immortality, survival. The son says Kaddish once and stops, but he draws MAUS. So I thought that was a really good footing to start off. That is the distillation of it. It is as best I can. So let's get to the right place here. Okay. So this book, which is in two parts. There's two books, and again, this is hefty, so we're not. Another reason why we're not going to go through all of this. It was serialized from 1980 to 1991, so it was fairly long running. Before it was collected. In 1992, it became the first graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize, which is wild. I believe that when I was in high school, this is on a short list of books we could do like a report on for our Holocaust unit, and I did choose this book, and that was roughly around, I believe, 1996, or thereabouts.
1990.
So I've been, and I immediately went out into the local comic book shop and bought the trades because I was just this was a jaw dropping work. It's very easy to see why it won a Pulitzer Prize. So most of this book weaves in and out of two timelines. In the frame tale of the narrative present, Spiegelman interviews his father Vladek in the Rego Park neighborhood of Queens in New York City in 1978-79. The story that Vladek tells unfolds in the narrative past, which begins in the mid-1930s and continues until the end of the Holocaust in 1945. In Rego Park in 1958, a young Art Spiegelman is skating with his friends when he falls down and hurts himself, but his friends keep going. When he returns home, he finds his father Vladek, who asks him why he's upset, and Art proceeds to tell him that his friends left him behind. His father responds in broken English, "Friends? Your friends? If you lock them together in a room with no food for a week, then you could see what it is, friends." I'm going to go through here in the next couple paragraphs, and I'm going to just horrifically butcher some Polish names. I apologize to the Jewish people. I apologize to the entire country of Poland and every Polish American who can pronounce most Polish names. I apologize in advance. I'm going to just completely mess this up. As an adult, Art visits his father, from whom he has become estranged. Vladek has remarried to a woman called Mala since the suicide of Art's mother, Anya, in 1968. Art asks Vladek to recount his Holocaust experiences. Vladek tells of his time in the Polish city of Czechoslovakia, I think that's how that's pronounced, and how he came to marry into Anya's wealthy family in 1937 and moved to Sosnowiec to become a manufacturer. Vladek begs Art not to include this in the book, and Art reluctantly agrees. There's a lot of this, too, by the by, where Vladek, Art Spiegelman's father, will say, please don't put this in the book, and it's obviously in the book and in the artwork, so he kind of ignores that. It's meta in that way. Anya suffers a breakdown due to postpartum depression after giving birth to their first son, Richiu, and the couple go to a sanitarium in Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia for her to recover. After they return, political and anti-Semitic tensions build until Vladek is drafted just before the Nazi invasion of Poland. Vladek is captured at the front and forced to work as a prisoner of war. After his release, he finds Germany has annexed Sosnowiec, and he has dropped off on the other side of the border in the German protectorate. He sneaks across the border and reunites with his family. During one of Art's visits, he finds that a friend of Mala's has sent the couple one of the underground comics magazines Art contributed to in his youth. Mala had tried to hide it, but Vladek finds and reads it. In a story titled Prisoner on the Hell Planet, Art is traumatized by his mother's suicide 3 months after his release from a mental hospital, and in the end depicts himself behind bars saying, "You murdered me, Mommy, and left me here to take the rap." Though it brings back painful memories, Vladek admits that dealing with the issue in such a way was for the best. This is kind of, as a side note, kind of a formative thing. There's a lot of references to the fact that even pre-war, Anya, Art's mother, has mental health problems. And it's unspecified because I think a lot of the stuff that she was going through just didn't really have they didn't have the language for it at the time, or they didn't have the diagnoses, obviously, that we have today. It seems like she has some kind of anxiety disorder, but it's never really specified. But it's an ongoing issue even pre-war. So that's important to note, is that this woman, I mean, literally survived the Holocaust only to commit suicide later. In 1943, the Nazis moved the Jews of the Sosnowiec ghetto to Shrodula and marched them back to Sosnowiec to work. The family splits up. Vladek and Anya send Riccio to Zawerci. God, I apologize to Polish people. To stay with an aunt for safety. As more Jews are sent from the ghettos to Auschwitz, the aunt poisons herself, her children, and Riccio. So now Vladek and Anya's son has died in a pretty incredibly tragic act of defiance and self-defense. The scene in the book is heartbreaking, but she poisons them to escape the Gestapo and not die in the gas chamber. In Shrodula, many Jews build bunkers to hide from the Germans. Vladek's bunker is discovered, and he is placed into a ghetto inside the ghetto surrounded by barbed wire. The remnants of Vladek and Anya's family are taken away. Shrodula is cleared of its Jews except for a group Vladek hides with in another bunker. When the Germans depart, the group splits up and leaves the ghetto. In Sosnowiec, Vladek and Anya move from one hiding place to the next, making occasional contact with other Jews in hiding. Vladek disguises himself as an ethnic Pole and hunts for provisions. The couple arrange with smugglers to escape to Hungary, but it is a trick. The Gestapo arrest them on the train as Hungary is invaded and take them to Auschwitz, where they are separated until after the war. At this point, Art asks after Anya's diaries, which Vladek tells him were her account of her Holocaust experiences, and the only record of what happened to her after her separation from Vladek at Auschwitz, in which Vladek says she had wanted Art to read. Vladek comes to admit that he burned them after she killed herself. Art is enraged and calls Vladek a murderer. So this is also a really formative part of this story as well, is this missing account of Anya's and what she went through. During the course of this story, we pretty much only see what Vladek experiences because he's the only one who has survived long enough to tell his story. Art is able to kind of piece together bits and pieces, and again, it's detailed a lot better in MAUS, the companion book, but is not able to get a full recounting for obvious reasons. Not only were these diaries burned, but his mother has committed suicide. So it's just really, really fucking tragic. That half of the story is missing. The story now jumps to 1986 after the first 6 chapters of MAUS have appeared in collected edition. Art is overcome with the unexpected attention the book receives and finds himself totally blocked with writer's block. Art talks about the book with his psychiatrist, Pavel, a Czech Holocaust survivor. Pavel suggests that as those who perished in the camps could never tell their stories, maybe it's better not to have any more stories. Art replies with a quote from Samuel Beckett. Every word is like an unnecessary stain on silence and nothingness. But then when he realizes, on the other hand, he said it. Vladek tells of his hardship in the camps, of starvation and abuse, of his resourcefulness, of avoiding the selektionen, the process by which prisoners were selected for further labor or execution. Despite the danger, Anya and Vladek exchange occasional messages, so they are able to pass messages back and forth very, very carefully. As the war progresses and German front is pushed back, the prisoners are marched from Auschwitz in occupied Poland to Gross-Rosen within the Reich and then to Dachau, where their hardships only increase and Vladek catches typhus. The war ends, the camp survivors are freed, and Vladek and Anya reunite. The book closes with Vladek turning over in his bed as he finishes his story and telling Art, "I'm tired from talking, Riccio, and it's enough stories for now." The final image is of Vladek and Anya's tombstone. Vladek died in 1982 before the book was completed. So that is the very abridged version of these books. Josh, do you have any questions, comments, thoughts, feelings?
I'm trying to figure out how to word this because I'm just trying to comprehend or understand why this is banned.
So the reason is, and that depends on what library or district or what have you is talking to, but the one that I have seen the most often is because there is a picture. At one point, there's a comic panel. It's not a picture; it is a panel of comics of the comic book itself, wherein a bunch of so the conceit in this book is that all of the Nazi soldiers are depicted as cats. All of the Jews are depicted as mice, with kind of human-esque bodies. So they have mouse faces or cat faces, but they sort of human-esque hybrid things. But there is a panel in which post execution, a bunch of mouse bodies are stacked in a way that we can all kind of visualize from pictures that we have unfortunately seen. They're just kind of tossed into a pile. And on one of those panels, a mouse titty is visible. And that apparently was so offensive that the book needed to be banned. And again, as Josh has said earlier, they're never banned for a legitimate reason. This is a book about the Holocaust. And that's the objection, is that you can see a cartoon mouse boob on a pile of dead bodies.
And one of the other objections is that the words bitch and goddamn are used.
Yes,
in
they're
this book.
swearing.
I mean, not like the swearing that will be edited out of this episode. Those two words in particular, which I am going to keep in the classroom edition. But it was ultimately, that was in 2022, and it was not upheld because it was in a 9th grade class. And they said had it been in a middle school, they would have upheld so apparently the difference of 2 years is enough for bitch.
Yes. And I also want to point out too, on broadcast television, you can use the word bitch now.
Yes.
So it's not like right. You're using the N word or anything like that. Like this is, you can turn on Bluey, I guess, and have somebody call somebody else a bitch, right? Like that's a show about dogs.
Right.
But yeah, so it's never for a good reason. And that was the one that I saw, is that there was a depiction of one boob, which I think is asinine.
There have also been several articles that link this book is challenged when anti-Semitism is on the rise in the United States.
Yep.
So they're trying to find any excuse.
This is kind of boggling my mind because they've banned this book due to a cartoon, essentially a cartoon nudity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my experience in working in the comic book store is there is literally a comic book called, I don't know if this is going to stay in the episode or not, but there's literally a comic book called Money Shot, where there are these astronauts that literally go to space and solve problems with sex, and there's nudity, and there's sexual situations in this comic book, and it's full color. It's the blonde bimbo having a threesome with these aliens and all this stuff. And how is this book still able to get published? However, one mouse appendage flops out, and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, it's really silly, and it's not in the example that I saw about the alleged mouse boob. The woman who brought it up for a challenge admitted that she herself had never even seen the book. She just heard that there was some potential mouse nudity in it, which is bonkers.
Asinine. It's asinine is what it is.
So it gets challenged a lot for that. I think it is because the subject matter and the way that it is presented make people deeply uncomfortable, as it should. This is not a comfortable book. This is a hard read. This is not your lighthearted, like, I'm going to go set this down and then I'm going to go, like, on a picnic with my kids sort of situation. This is like, you set the day aside, you're like, I'm going to read Mouse and don't do anything else. Like, it's, maybe watch some cartoons to decompress at the end of the day or something. Maybe play a video game to get your, headspace back in where you want it to be. But this is, I think of it very much as the way that I think of Schindler's List. I think everybody should read it. I think it should be required reading. But when you do it, like, just set that whole day aside. You're not doing anything else but looking at this book.
Now, I do want to make sure, in the interest of kind of staying fair, that we say, like, the example with Money Shot, that will not be in a school.
True. Very true.
So when we talk about banned books, they're not banned from being sold. They are banned generally from being in schools, up to and including colleges sometimes, which is the most disturbing thing to me.
Public libraries as well. That's
public libraries, yeah.
Too.
Right.
Well, since we're talking about public libraries, and you have all these books that deal with growing up, going through puberty,
right.
These other things that shows nudity, menstrual cycles, pubic areas, all this stuff. How is this?
Yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, we did an earlier episode on sex criminals. I can get that at my local library, no problem. But I think in this particular case, you also find that this book is banned in heavily non-Jewish areas. You're not going to get the Skokie Public Library banning Mouse. It's as Josh pointed out, when anti-Semitism is on the rise, so is the amount of people seeking to ban this book. So, from school libraries as well as public libraries for a number of ridiculous and implausible. So,
right, but things like, I mean, I guess I'm looking at the 100 most banned books, and like Walking Dead is on there, which I know also has some nudity. But like the majority of these are not graphic novels.
Right.
The majority of these are words on a page, and that is so threatening. It doesn't even have the context or the added benefit of pictures.
Right. And I also want to point out too, The Walking Dead and Persepolis, I think, is probably out there as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
But like aside from Persepolis is also a great example. But Walking Dead, Saga, things like that, those are fiction. Persepolis and Mouse are nonfiction. This is, so that's a striking thing, as well as like you're not just banning a story somebody made up, you're banning like somebody's memoir, somebody's biography or autobiography of real events that took place, which is that, I guess, again, that's boggling to me as well. Like, this is not a story somebody made up. This is real life. You can't ban real life. It doesn't work like that.
Bone is on this list too.
What is
on the list?
Bone.
What?
Yeah. Now I got to find out why, because
it's because bone is a slang term for sexual intercourse. They didn't really need to know any more than that.
I distinctly remember in high school, and Leia, you went to the same high school I did.
I did.
Smoking, drinking, and gambling.
Oh,
is why bone. Yeah.
I remember for one of my classes, we actually watched Schindler's List.
Yes, yeah, it was a required.
It was a requirement.
Yeah, and I think because we got it. So here's the interesting thing about this, and Josh, I don't know if you shared the same experience, but we were the first class, at least as far as I can recall, that ever got to watch Schindler's List in school, because it had only recently come out on like VHS. For kids, by the way, VHS is an ancient form of viewing media, television, movies, most usually movies, that was not disc format. You had to rewind them and stuff. It was a very different time.
And actually, in the spring of 1994, my freshman year. They rented out a theater and
Yeah.
bussed the kids to go and see it.
Yeah, they for us we had a very large auditorium, and we were able, what they did is they split the school into I think 4 different groups because it was required for everybody to watch.
Yep.
And so we just all went at our assigned times to watch Schindler's List. But the thing that's interesting about this is even in I think this was like 1995, 1996. Even at that time, our parents had to sign releases. Okay, fine. It's got an R rating. But what they did is somebody from like the AV department, like one of the teachers, went in and slightly edited the tapes so that the sex scenes were removed. I want you to really sit with that for a minute. And when I say you, I mean the general you, like the population of the planet, is that we have a lengthy movie, a well-researched movie by a Jewish director about the Holocaust. And the parts that we can't watch involve human sexuality. All of the anti-Semitism, all of the horrifying violence, all of that A-okay, but God forbid somebody see 2 consenting adults having 30 seconds worth of simulated intercourse on a screen. Truly, what is wrong with this country, I must ask.
I remember also, I believe I saw it in school, was the Roberto Benigni. Was it A Beautiful Mind? No.
Oh,
His movie about the Holocaust.
that's not the boy in the straight pajamas, is it?
No.
No.
He won an Oscar for it.
I did.
Life is Beautiful?
Life is Beautiful.
Oh,
That is
okay.
it. And
Yeah, I saw that in the movie theater, but I did not see it in high school.
I saw it in high school, and it isn't depicting as much as Schindler's List did, but I still remember feeling the same thing after seeing that movie as I did Schindler's List. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's borderline. I've been debating on this for a while, but I mean, banning MAUS, borderline, I would say anti-Semitic. It's
I would say it's fully anti-Semitic.
okay, then it is fully anti-Semitic. But I mean, it's just boggling my mind how people can be taught other things like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whatever public figure can be taught in schools and everything like this. And not everybody had a fairy tale life. Some people had
Right.
misery.
Right.
And those things are depicted in either movie form, in novel form, graphic novel form. And those things aren't banned, but yet MAUS, who with one mouse tit,
Right.
boob, breast, mammogram, whatever you want to call it, people lose their fucking minds. Like,
Yeah.
it just,
It is really upsetting, especially because this book is so very important. Again, it won a Pulitzer Prize. Like,
Right.
I can't really state that enough. Like, it won a Pulitzer Prize. It was obviously considered an extremely worthy piece of artwork, to win that. And, the objections to it are like, oh, it's too real. I think about like The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison that you mentioned earlier. That was required reading in our high school, surprisingly enough, at least for me. I was a couple of years ahead of Josh. And,
For me, it was Beloved, which is also on the banned books list.
Yeah. And so both of those, if I remember correctly, both of them have are autobiographical and deal with sexual assault, and part of the reason that people want to ban those is because there's just depictions of sexual assault. Well, okay, but this is somebody's lived experience. This isn't fiction, and it's not glorified. It's not promoting those things, just like MAUS does not promote genocide.
no, it does not.
And
Teaching tool is what it is.
right, and but it the subject matter makes people uncomfortable, and for a certain type of person, that immediate reaction to that discomfort is, I don't want to look at it, so I don't think anybody else should ever look at it either, and that's, I'm sorry, that's just wrong-headed. Like, we have to deal with uncomfortable things in our lives, and uncomfortable historical events and things like that, and ignoring them is not the way to go about it. Pretending they never happened is not the way to go about it, and
I don't think it's so much as ignoring. what happened. I think it's just people getting offended for the stupidest thing.
Right. They just don't want to, they don't want to deal with it, mentally or emotionally. The thought that, that they might have, especially, through an American cultural lens, that they might have, relatives or ancestors that participated in this is deeply uncomfortable for them to think about, and so again, the knee-jerk reaction to that sort of uncomfortable knowledge is, no, they didn't, and that's where you get, Holocaust denialism and stuff that comes out of that as well, is, oh no, they didn't, but if they did, it wasn't that bad. And, even if it was that bad, they probably did something to deserve it. And, and you spiral out of control down that line. So, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that, banning books is bad. And
book banners have never been on the right side of history.
No,
Ever.
not once, not never. Yeah, I mean, like, it's just such a good, I'm sitting here and I'm flipping through. My book is so old and so well loved that I actually had to stop flipping through because it just started to fall apart on me. But I've read this book about a dozen times or more. And it just always, something that always sticks out to me about this book is that there were two major ways, it seems, to get through the Holocaust. And one of them was by being kind of selfishly independent, and being, in business for yourself, as it were, to borrow from a wrestling term. And the other way was cooperation and understanding that we're all in this together, and in order to get through this, we need to look out for each other to survive. We need to ensure the safety of the group to ensure the safety of the individual. And I think that's really striking. I think that's kind of not too dissimilar from where we are today, politically speaking. It's either, you can go through the, fuck you, I've got mine, or all right, everybody, let's get together and share our resources and take care of each other, So there's a lot to unpack in that.
I mean, and yeah, I'm still, of course, scrolling through this list because it makes me so angry. But things like 13 Reasons Why is on this list. And the reason is it discusses suicide. Well, that is the entire point of the book.
Right.
And when we don't discuss these things, we find that education or lack of education causes an increase in the behavior. See how well abstinence-only programs have gone for teen pregnancy.
Right.
So not talking about these things causes them. And it's, not educating people on the atrocities throughout history. It's very easy to take that small step from that to critical race theory.
Yeah.
Which again is a hot button topic now, because we're not saying that America has always been the greatest of all time. Yay 1950s idealists, utopian America. We weren't always the good guys. We haven't been. No country has.
Right.
And to be critical of the United States, to be critical of any country, does not necessarily mean being critical of every person living there now.
Right. Exactly. Like, I mean, like, Germany, I think has it kind of correct in that, like, you can't just draw swastikas or talk about how maybe Hitler had some good ideas or whatever. Like, you will get in serious trouble for doing that. And I think that's that's pretty correctly headed. Like, they don't have they don't pretend like the Holocaust did not occur.
Right.
I'm toying around with the idea that if you read or watch something and if it makes you feel a certain way, then it did its job.
Right.
Like one of the movies that kind of changed how I perceived myself along with other things is American History X.
Yes.
I was a very hateful teenager, hated the wrong people for stupid reasons. I saw that and that changed my life. And that movie had sex and anti-Semitism and whatever, everything under the sun that movie had. And then you look at, and it made me feel something to where I changed my perspective on life. If you pick up MAUS and you don't feel something after that,
Please talk to somebody about potentially being screened for sociopathy. Like,
please, because I think that's one of the reasons why Art Spiegelman may have adapted this telling to teach people, hey, you know, I'm
right.
trying to articulate the words to say this here and sound smart in front of Leia, but it's not working out so goodly. But I mean, I'm sorry. It's just,
No, I get it. And I think too, and again, really want to stress, please read this book. But there's nuances in this book that are very interesting too, because again, it is not a work of fiction, where there's a scene in which Vladek, again, a Holocaust survivor, a direct victim of anti-Semitism, they pick up a hitchhiker who happens to be black, and he freaks out. And he's like, essentially, in I believe Polish, he's like, this black guy's gonna rob us or whatever. And Art Spiegelman is completely taken aback by this encounter, and it's like, my dude, how could you, a person who have survived the Holocaust, be racist? But it's just kind of reinforcing the fact that people are complex creatures, and that it does not, everybody in here is a little messy. Nobody is perfect. Certainly the author does not treat his father, respectfully a lot of the time. And he drew criticism for that. But it's realism. And it's not a sanitized version of their relationship, and it's definitely not a sanitized version of the Holocaust. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this book, is that there's so much nuance to every person that appears in it, and kind of what they're like as a person, even when it comes down to the relationship between Vladek and Mala, Art's stepmother. That's not a perfect relationship either. They love each other, but also they're dealing with trauma. I mean, Mala herself was also a Holocaust survivor. So and then you get into depictions of generational trauma with Art and things like that. And, how that echoes kind of down generations of people who survived this incredibly horrific experience, and again, there's so much to unpack in this book. There's so much nuance that this podcast cannot possibly do it justice. I'm trying my best. But it's absolutely gorgeous. And it really hasn't, I mean, this is 40 years old, and 40 and change years old, and it has only aged like a fine wine. It could have been written yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So, Josh, how did we do explaining MAUS?
I tried very hard. I wanted Leia to kind of explain to me, and I hold off on questions afterwards. And this, having never read it, having had it in my possession for years and years, I think I'm going to go, I definitely am going to go read this now and just kind of soak it in, because it just boggles my mind. Saga of all books got banned too. I mean, I collected Saga, and it's a phenomenal book.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they just ban Dawn?
Well,
deep cuts.
I'll let you know right now. Don Baldwin, Leia, and Jen have banned it. So,
this was remarkable. Thank you very much for letting me be a part of this. As someone who, born and raised Jewish, although I am not a practicing member of the tribe, if you will. I mean, I love bacon and I have tattoos, but I dealt with racism my childhood.
Sure.
I got made fun of for being Jewish, and if I could throw this at their faces and be like, hey, you think being me is tough? Read this and see what real heartache is like.
Right.
Maybe it would have changed some people's opinions.
Yeah. If it were available, I have to agree. Yeah. And I'm sorry that you experienced that. For sure.
Oh yeah.
It sucks. And I'm really, I don't think excited is the right word here, but I'm happy that that you're gonna take some time to read this book and sit with it. You know, it's really important. I think it's one of the most important graphic novels in existence, and I have a lot that I could go on and talk about this book with, but we do not have the time.
Right.
And again, I really want to stress, like, reading it is pretty much the primary way that you need to experience this. Is
Yeah.
You know, so many of these stories we do, and it's like, oh, you could look at it or not. You know, we could just tell you the story. This is definitely something you need to actually see with your own eyes. Much like the artwork in The Human Target, you just have to look at it.
Absolutely. For very different reasons.
Yes, very different reasons, but still important. Like,
yep, I agree. And on that, that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Josh, thank you so much for joining us on this. Hopefully we'll get you back next time for something a little lighter.
Yes.
Something you have not read.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is a difficult challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Until then, take it away, Vandello.
A little wreck conversation, some deep reactions, please. All this comics narration alienating me. A little more talk, a lot less read. A little fight, baby, is what I need. Close the trade, open up your brains. Explain it to me. Explain it to me, baby. Explain it to me. Explain it to me, baby. Explain it to me. Vandello 2021.